Welcome to Work Comp Talk, a podcast dedicated to all of the injured workers here in California. And we are excited to host this particular episode along with Bilal Qasim. Thank you for joining me and not leaving me alone in this amazing episode that we have lined up for you. How are you, Bilal?
I'm doing good. Happy to talk about what we have on deck today.
Yeah, so today we're going to be diving into one of the most controversial proposals in workers' comp's history. Yes, we haven't seen something like this. How many years? Probably before I was even born at this point. No, actually, I take that back. I think during COVID, there was some presumptions that were added that kind of hyped up the game as well, obviously. But what are we talking about? SB 555, the Senate Bill 555, which we're going to kind of briefly talk to you about. We're going to introduce it. What do you know about this, Bilal? Like, please break it down for us in plain English. What does SB 555 mean for injured workers?
Yeah, so permanent disability is in large part what makes up workers' comp value for injured workers. When you have a disability that can't be fixed through medical care, the disability has a percentage rating attached to it, and that's what the insurance company then is obligated to pay you. And the issue was that permanent disability hasn't changed in forever. The last major change in value of permanent disability that we got through statute, which was back in 2013, was a good change, but still, it was okay for the time, but nothing's changed since then. So essentially, injured workers have been getting the same pay rate for disabilities going back now 12 years.
Yeah.
And that
Like
hasn't changed
inflation
at all.
doesn't exist, right? Like inflation doesn't affect our everyday life and we can still get paid. What?
Yeah. It used to be that injured workers pre-2013 were getting paid $230 a week for disability. Depending on how high your disability went, it could be more, up to
Right.
270. But then SB 863 and the legislature changed permanent disability rates to 290 per week beginning in 2014. And that's been the same thing. If you were injured between then and now, 2025, you're still getting that $290 a week, which obviously we know things have changed massively. Like COVID included, some inflations. I mean, cost of living for people is up like 50% in the last few years alone, but they haven't gotten anything through workers' comp. It's been the same pay rate.
Okay. So tell me what's proposed. What's the deal? What is the plan behind this? Who does it help? Who does it affect? How does that work?
So there's two components to this, right? One, there's just the fact that injured workers would get a raise in permanent disability. The novel complexity to all of this is that the proposal would include an ongoing raise for injured workers every single year based off inflation data, the same type of raise you would see with Social Security, for example. They would say, COLA, cost of living adjustments, inflation's 3% this year, so in 2026 it could be a 3% raise for permanent disability. If inflation the next year was 5%, then it would be a 5% raise. And this provision goes on indefinitely, which is unique to permanent disability because the raises that have been in effect for permanent disability have generally been through statute, meaning you don't get a raise unless someone updates the law with a specific number. That's what we saw in 2013, right? We saw it go from 230 to 270 to 290 ultimately, and then that's been what it's been. So this change in the law would just automatically increase the pay rates for injured workers every single year based on inflation without the legislature having to do anything else in the future, which would be a humongous relief to injured workers going forward.
That would be amazing. That would be like an ideal situation, which to be honest with you, it's almost like the right thing to do, right? It's kind of like you can't pretend that life hasn't changed and that it's still the same rate that it was back in 2014. So my biggest question to you is, who could lose big with this SB 555?
I mean, insurance companies for sure, self-insured employers. They're looking at it and cringing and saying, oh God, every year we have to pay injured workers more now. It's too much money. We can't afford it. And, from their perspective, the insurance companies, they'll pass on the costs. If they eat more costs, that means that they're going to charge more in insurance premiums from employers. Employers having to pay more insurance premiums are going to increase the cost of goods and services to absorb that increase. And those obviously increase in cost of goods and services get passed on to consumers. So it's cyclical, it's if
Yeah.
injured workers get paid more, it's coming from somewhere else. And so I have no doubt in my mind that employers and insurance companies will try to make up that difference somewhere. They're not going to say, oh, you know what, we'll just take in less profit. I think they're going to increase what they charge on their end to account for that. But at the end of the day, I think it's far more important that these injured workers get what they're entitled to and get a permanent disability rate commensurate with cost of living and really what their disability actually equates to in today's terms, not terms from 13 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think they would kind of, because it's always been like, we'll give you something and we'll take something in return, right? Do you think that would be a significant impact if, hey, we're giving you guys this now, and who knows, maybe they'll be like, hey, moving forward, you guys are not allowed to even go to litigation. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, there is some horse trading usually. Back when we had the change in permanent disability rates, we gave up secondary claims for psych problems, sexual dysfunction, and sleep problems secondary to an orthopedic injury. You used to be able to plead those things and always get permanent disability for those, but they gave those up when we got the pay rate increases. And among other things, we had the creation of independent medical review, which hasn't been a great process for injured workers to appeal medical treatment. So as of now, I'm not sure. I haven't heard any specific rumblings about things that maybe the insurance lobby is after in order to be okay with an increase in permanent disability. I can tell you, being that this isn't a one-time increase, that it would be an increase in perpetuity going into effect as of January 2026, that it's a big deal. It's a big deal. If you're
I mean, it's huge, right? It's sending shockwaves all over California at this point, right? Some people say it's dangerous in some sort.
Yeah, I mean, the insurance lobby is, look, you're going to tell us that the main cost of permanent disability is going to go up based on inflation, which is unpredictable every single year. That's, as a financial entity would look at that, say that's a very scary risk. Right now they look at it and say, hey, you know what? We know every single year we have X number of claims, and the permanent disability cost is X number of dollars because the rate's the same, and it's an average, this many claims, this many, this much permanent disability. It's kind of easy for them as a financial model to predict the impact that it's going to have on them. But when it goes up every year, it's harder for them to model that. So I think they're going to be extra cautious about ensuring they have the funds, liquidity and such to pay out on claims and absorb the costs as they continue to increase year by year.
Yeah. Why do you think, after all this time, this is finally an idea? Like, why now? Why didn't this happen before? Or
I don't know. It's a really good question. My understanding, and I guess I'm kind of a subject matter expert at this point. I was going to say I'm not an expert, but I only know what I know. Some of it is that it's not necessarily been a priority.
Right.
When we talk about how things get done in the legislature, a lot of times it's where the money is. Where the money is, who's got the loudest voice, who makes up the biggest group of constituents that has a problem that needs to be solved. That's who gets the most attention. And I think for the workforce in California, the idea of workers' comp is a little bit of I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but it's not a major priority when you have unions that are just trying to keep people employed, avoid layoffs. You have unions that are just fighting for basic wages, medical benefits, and things from employers just to get by.
Yeah.
Workers' comp as an idea is it's just not that much of a priority when their focus, quite frankly, is probably more important focusing on the issues with people who are currently employed in far larger numbers than there are people that are injured. And so I think workers' comp as a system always kind of takes a back seat a little bit to other issues potentially. And this, at least for some time, was not a major issue, but the further we've drifted away from 2014, the more inflation has affected people. I think the fact that workers' comp has paid such low rates has become more of a priority.
Yeah, for sure. My question is, Is this just for California, or, are we the only ones going through this type of situation?
It's a good question. I know each state has their own workers' comp laws. I'm by no means well studied in other state laws. So, my main focus is California, and this is a California specific amendment to a California specific statute. Each state administers their workers' comp benefits in the way they see fit. So,
Yeah. I'm just thinking nationwide, maybe this was something in another state and they're just finally now adapting it to the California state, or vice versa. California's always been known to be the rebel state that starts shit and then all the other states follow through, right? Maybe this is a nationwide issue. I mean, I just have so many questions in regards to it, right? Then I think to myself, if Dave Cortese, which was, he was doing his thing in San Jose, I actually got to meet him and interview him before with all of the stuff he was trying to do, for the city of San Jose. And I'm like, did someone in his family get injured to where he opened up his eyes and realized this is a huge issue within the workers' compensation system, and this is something that affects injured workers, right? And I don't know, I just start thinking like all these scenarios in my head, where he realized, okay, this is really going to help injured workers. But then on the other hand, if you look at it as a business owner, let's say you have a small moms and pop shop, right? You're barely making it because you have to get the workers' comp insurance when you have employers or employees, and you can barely even afford it. And then this makes their pricing go up. And then where does that leave businesses? So it's kind of like this whole, I get the benefit to it, and I'm all for it, dude. I've seen many cases, and I think Bilal at Pacific Workers, which by the way happens to be our sponsors for the show. Check them out at pacificworkers.com. I think that cases that have come along the way with Pacific Workers, there's been people that have been homeless because they can't make ends meet, because living in the Bay Area is super expensive. What are you going to do with temporary disability benefits being paid at the rate that they are now? Like, good luck to you if you can get gas and pay your cell phone bill and maybe a little bit of food. Like, it's really squeezing it tight for people to make ends meet with what's currently happening, right? So
yeah, and I think it's interesting because there's two different financial benefits primarily in workers' comp: temporary disability and permanent disability. And temporary disability, when you look at the statutes, is adjusted every single year based on inflation data. And temporary disability is designed as a wage replacement while you're recovering for your injury, while as permanent disability is something that's designed to compensate you for the functional limitations you have following an injury. And so I think when the legislature initially designed these benefits, they were thinking, okay, well, let's give people ever increasing temporary disability to help them while they're recovering, but then they're going to go back to work.
right.
And I think a lot of people don't go back to work. And more the focus of permanent disability, at least in my practice and what I see, is income for people, is wage replacement, is gonna, pay their cell phone bill, pay their rent, put food on the plates for their kids, while they're trying to find new employment. Because I think the majority of people, at least that I see come through our firm, they do lose their job. Not because they want to, it's because of work restrictions and limitations that force them out. And so, permanent disability, looking at it in an isolated perspective is, oh, this is just for the disability. It's not really anything to do with wage loss. I think that's where the legislature kind of fell short all these years in designing the benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. So for those of you that haven't heard yet, SB 555, the Senate Bill 555, has recently been doing a lot of trend in the workers' compensation world, in the system, right? Because it's something that you don't often see within the system itself. There's never really anything huge happening, but this is big. I mean, if you were to break this down below and kind of summarize what this bill is trying to explain, what would be a best way, on top of the fact that we're talking about changing the way that the disability payments are being allocated, or not even allocated, they're just the way that they're being calculated?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique reform. Permanent disability has always been just set by statute as a fixed number, regardless of inflation data. And if this goes through, that would forever change, the way benefits are calculated for injured workers in a major way, that would make them seemingly feel more made whole after an injury,
Of course.
And for those whoever's in Senator Caballero's district, she was the sponsor, so
I was
make
going to
sure
ask you that.
you hit her
Who's
up
the
and
money
show her
behind
some
this?
love because she's doing work to help everyone, in her community. And I think this was a fantastic idea. I'm so excited to see it go through. It was just in committee a couple weeks back. You guys can check this out on the legislation tracker online, so you can actually see it go through the process.
I'm going to go ahead and link everything on the description because I think it's really, really cool. It's obviously something, it's a proposal. It's a change. I did see something in there, Bilal, that talked about kind of like a streamline into the medical treatment and then obviously reducing the litigation. How do you feel about that?
I mean, so there was another bill that was put forward, and that was to clean up access for injured workers, I believe, in the San Joaquin, to give them better access to more doctors, which is something that's historically been a major issue in the area, statewide. And there was a previous bill that was put through. It didn't actually pass to create a statewide medical provider network. This was a couple years back, which would have been fantastic. Right now people have to go through an MPN that's specific to an insurance company or an employer, and they're limited to the doctors only in that network. And sometimes the network's outdated. There's doctors on there who aren't even practicing anymore, or they're listed as an orthopedist, but they're really a podiatrist. Or maybe there's no doctors within like 75 miles on that one network, but they're on another network. It created a lot of chaos for injured workers. That's something I'd love to see come back into the legislature, and the creation of a statewide medical provider network to give every person in California comparable access to doctors that aren't forced to do what they need to do to stay in insurance networks, because it could be a state-run MPN, which means they don't have to please anyone on the insurance side. They can run autonomously.
Yeah. What do you think is missing? Obviously you've been litigating, you've been helping as an applicant's attorney, you've been advocating for injured workers so many years. I mean, you've seen it all, right?
Yeah.
In your perspective, what's missing from this bill that you think would have been cool to have been added or talked about at least, or?
I mean, this bill's for 2026 as an effective date. I would have loved to see it as a retroactive bill.
That would have been awesome.
See all the COLA increases. But, I mean, let's be real. If that were the case, it wouldn't pass, because the amount of increased costs for all claims, open claims, if it were since 2020 or 2014, going back, I don't know what the difference in pay rate weekly would be. If currently it's $290, I imagine probably would have doubled by now with how much inflation we've had. I would have loved to see permanent disability immediately for claims after 2014 jump to like $500 a week or something, or scaling up at least. So, I'd be a little disappointed that it's not retroactive, but that's still okay. It's still a big win, I think. I think it's hard to make up for that lost time. And, I have tons of clients that I know are in the midst of their cases, some going on for years, where they could really use that bump.
What does it mean? Because I was reading, obviously, the bill. What does it mean when it says something about, are you okay with letting the state handle your case? Can you break that down as to what that kind of pushes back? There is a part where it said something like, would you be okay? Obviously, they're trying to, with this new bill, increase the payments with permanent disability rate of that they haven't changed since dinosaur era. And as part of it, how we were talking about how like you'll get something, but you'll lose something. Part of that was maybe even rumor has it that there'll be less doctors, which is an issue that you just brought up. Central Valley has a huge amount of doctors that are not necessarily available for workers in the area. So what if they were to reduce less doctors? And then, would you be okay with kind of the state being more involved in the system as opposed to, I don't know, who handles the injury claims now, which are attorneys like you?
Yeah, I mean, workers' comp's a benefits delivery system, right? The whole idea
Right.
is to get rid of litigation, get rid of unnecessary costs and time wasted fighting over things, and streamline delivery of benefits, medical care to injured workers, right? That's the whole point of it. And I think
Yeah.
when you have insurance companies whose primary responsibility is to deliver profit to their shareholders, to ensure that their operational costs, their expenses are as low as possible to maximize profit, that in and of itself is at odds with the idea of being a benefits delivery system.
Yeah,
So
true.
you have conflicting interests in a system that's not supposed to have conflicting interests, you know. And I think if California were to take a larger stake in administering claims, you'd probably see a lot less fight and a lot less issues.
Yeah.
You'd probably see more access to medical care, benefits delivered faster than they would be otherwise, less denials, less fighting overall, you know, because California's responsibility is to its taxpayers, its people.
Right.
Those are the injured workers, you know. Those are the people who make up the state. You know, it's not
Right.
a financial entity. You know, California, I think, is not after profit. I think California's stance has always been, let's just not spend over budget.
Right.
That's it, you know. And I think as long as it's well budgeted for, I don't see a problem with it. And I think doctors probably would be more incentivized to join networks, knowing that they don't have to, you know, play as many games to ensure that they can continue to see patients and such.
Right. That would be awesome. That would be the ideal situation scenario.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if you're watching this podcast or if you are listening to this podcast. You know, let us know what you think about the SB 555. Write down in all the comments below whether you're against it or you're for it. I'm going to start my own survey and I'm just going to see how people feel in regards to it. And if you want to dive deeper into it, I am going to be able to link in the description what the SB 555 is all about. So that when you guys get a chance, you guys can read up on it. Is there anything else you want to break down, Bilal? I mean, I can sit here and ask so many questions. Like one that I was thinking about is like, you know how you've done the opposite side of workers' comp. You've helped insurance companies in the beginning stages of your career. Man, I would love to know if you were in the shoes of the opposite side, not the applicant, but the insurance company, what would this bill mean to you and how would that shake up your company? Like, I can just imagine how, like, nerve-wracking it is to be in that position, you know, where it's like, we're going to have to pay out more some way, shape, or form, or I don't know. You being on that side, I'm going to ask regardless. You're already here. If you were on the opposite side, what would this bill mean to you?
I mean, my perspective on that would be that as a company now, my costs are going to go up in a semi-unpredictable amount every single year,
Yeah.
just like
That's
clockwork.
scary, right?
Yeah, it's, you know, if you were told like your cost of gas, your mortgage, your rent, your groceries, everything just keeps going up, it's stressful. And I think that's what people are living through. You know, that's
Right.
what they have been living through. It's miserable. You know, as a company, they're probably going to be a little more strategic in how they price their insurance policies. You know, how much they pay their staff, you know, their overhead.
Yeah.
That's going to get passed on the employers and consumers and such. So, you know, they'll absorb it. You know, obviously it makes costs go up for
Right.
everyone, but the idea that costs go up for everyone so that people who really are in need can get the benefits they deserve, you know, I think it makes sense. But I think it's going to have to wait and see basically how much is an added cost this equates to every single year.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a 30% increase in costs, but it's, you know, a fraction of their overall budget, I don't think you're going to see a major reaction. If we're seeing major increases, you know, in costs to the insurance companies that are sizable, then yeah, they're going to have to rethink their business strategies a little bit.
100%. That is so true. I don't know. Is there anything an injured worker can do to kind of help push this? I mean, do
Hell
we call
yeah,
senators'
call your
offices?
state
Like,
senator. If you're not in
what
Senator
do we start
Caballero's
doing?
district, reach out to your local, state assembly member, your senators, and tell them what's up. You know,
Yeah.
this really matters. This is probably one of the most impactful bills I've seen in the entirety of time I've been practicing workers' comp now, which since 2011, so 14 years now. This is potentially the biggest change for people. So it's a
Would this
really
make
important bill.
history if it goes through?
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
Come on, y'all. If you guys want to be a part of history, you want to be part of a really amazing benefit that I think has been long overdue. I mean, we've had injured workers constantly comment of how low those disability payments are coming in, and being able to change this and being able to be a part of it by calling, by figuring, getting involved, voicing your power that you have as a citizen, as a resident in California. Like, this is the time for you to get involved, do what you got to do. I mean, it'd be really awesome to see, hey, we were all part of this, and it happened and it benefited and it changed and it evolved the workers' compensation system. So I think we can stay here below and keep talking about this and fantasize and get our hopes up, or dive deeper into what the actual Senate bill is stating, kind of discussing the nit and little crevices that are on there as well. But I want to appreciate your time for even shedding the light on this, because you're excited about it. So it makes me excited about it. I can just imagine what it does for the injured workers. So once again, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you do so. Hit that bell notification so you can get notified every time we get on a podcast and create new content for you as well. Remember, it's educational. Speaking about educational, we should bring the people behind this Senate bill and try and see if we can invite them to the podcast. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned. I might do some digging around myself and find a way how Work Comp Talk can get their hands into this amazing bill that's just been presented. And hopefully we can get something out of it. So stay tuned. Obviously, follow us, subscribe on any channel that you listen to your podcast. I do want to say thank you to those who have been listening to us on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify, which are highest trending podcast applications where people listen to us. And most importantly, for those that have continuously commented and shared and subscribed to our podcast. So Bilal, I'm going to let you go back to litigating and figuring out what's up with your cases. But in the meantime, thank you guys. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.